And JK, I don't know, because of the Olympics, is all of a sudden we've lost a little bit of, I suppose, lost track of what's coming up, whereas this is a huge rugby championship. Yes, the All Blacks have started positively, 3 wins out of 3, but we've got a couple of different challenges coming here, and it's Argentina, who have now beaten the All Blacks in New Zealand before. You've got South Africa away, and then you've got the Wallabies, who under Joe Schmidt are looking to build some confidence. This is something to relish and look forward to, right?
Yeah, I went to Randwick yesterday. So the last time I went to Randwick, we had a massive midweek game for the All Blacks, and I was talking to Simon Poitevin about some buoyancy. Lots of people there, people like 7,000-8,000 people. Great to see Club Rugby, but there's this new spirit in Australia. They're really happy with Joe. They think the team's heading in the right direction. I personally believe this is the hardest championship we've played for a long, long time, just because how do you go to South Africa with a South Africa that's in such form and play twice over there? So it's a different type of competition. Are people saying to me, oh, South Africa aren't coming here? No, we're going there twice, Argentina here twice. So it makes it way more difficult, I believe, you know?
Are we sleeping on Argentina a little bit, though? I mean, I don't think the All Blacks in any way, shape or form will be underestimating them, the fact, but I know we're not, but in some ways, because it hasn't been front and centre, yeah. Are we looking at, yes, we dominated them a semi-final of Rugby World Cup, Mills, but this is a squad under a new coach who beat France. Yes, it might have been France B team that went into Argentina, but they've done that and they've won. This is a team that will be coming here with an element of not necessarily confidence, but knowing that they can beat the All Blacks.
But motivation. No, we know. I mean, they didn't play their best sort of rugby against a weakened French side. I think the All Blacks don't take them like it in the physical side. I think they've had enough, a couple of weeks of sort of, gearing up towards the All Blacks, that they come here and they say, hey, we're going to take them on physically. And if you compare that to what the English did, these next two are, I think they're really important. They are really important games, particularly for the All Blacks to kickstart the championship.
And for our middle row, Scott Barrett looks as though he's out for the first couple of Test matches through an injury to one of his fingers. So, and remember that there's no Brodie Retallick, JK, and there's no Sam Whitelock. So all of a sudden, the 3 locks that played last year against them in the semi-final are no longer there. So it's up to a young Sam Darry, and it's up to Patrick Tuipulotu and Tupou Vai to lead the charge, because that's an area up front that they're going to have a go, right?
Yeah, the biggest issue for me is probably the leadership side of things in the middle of the pack. I think that Scott Barrett is an amazing leader. He's also gives you confidence, not only as our captain now, but he's learnt from Retallick, he's learnt from that. And I think locking and that hard yards takes something special. And you have to earn the right with Argentina. I don't know why, but everybody underestimates Argentina, and it's probably because they're Latin-based, right? You guys have beaten France and then lost them 3 months later. I've done the same. Argentina's the same. They come down, but you never know what you're going to get. But if they turn up, if they're motivated, if they're ready to go, they're as good as any other side around. They're 4th in the world, aren't they? When they got knocked out in the quarters.
Yeah, they turned up 2 years ago in Christchurch.
That's right.
They came to Christchurch in conditions which suited them because it was a little bit wet, a little bit dewy. We made a couple of errors, presented them a couple of soft tries, and then, like the first time they beat us in Australia through the COVID years, I'll talk about that, their defence stood up. So, Mills, I mean, I look at it, who needs to make an impact for the All Blacks, and are we expecting a similar team that maybe we saw to the second test at England, those 2 test matches? Is that what you're expecting?
I mean, that Christchurch loss, I mean, that was big. There was a big week leading into there with the stuff that was happening off the field. I don't take too much into it. One thing I will take it, if you're not there mentally, and if you don't beat up the passion, because that's what they'll bring, they'll be really passionate. They've had 2 weeks to rejuvenate after their sort of games. If they don't go out there and win that physical dominance against, Argentina, it's going to be a long day at the office. And I think and when you look at the guys, what you just said, Barrett's out, who is going to step up and actually be that enforcer against a team that's going to be physical?
There's an Italian word called rognoso, which is like really annoying. They're just annoying. Yeah. At the breakdown, they slow it down. You get frustrated with them. Their defensive line is very good. They smack you around and they get you out of your rhythm. And so it becomes annoying. No one likes playing them because it's annoying. And then when you're getting annoyed, you start taking risks. You stop sticking to the game plan. So the most important thing for the All Blacks is actually to be ready for that and be really, really patient. And believe it or not, against Argentina, take your 3, take your 6, take your 9, right? Get to 12 and just really wear them down. If they're going to give away penalties, really work them out of that.
Shouldn't forget about this one as well. You talk about it, the Wallabies, the Springboks, that's happening in Brisbane. That's actually before the test in Wellington. This is huge for both of these sides, but the Wallabies in particular, you talked about it. Have they got a chance here?
I will gauge them on this weekend. The improvement, for me, will be gauged on that game. I think it's an amazing game for Joe to go, yeah, we've got in there now, let's see how close we are.
Yeah, they've got to progress. Oh, man, this is a strong South African side. It's going to be a good game, man. It's going to be a good game.
So, the greatest of all time. It's a discussion that happens all the time. And, of course, in sevens at this Olympics, it changed because a certain individual went from playing 15s for France, ended up playing in the sevens game, Antoine Dupont, and there was a suggestion that maybe he's now the greatest of all time, Mills. Now, that's a big statement for a guy that hasn't won a Rugby World Cup, but when you talk about this player, what's the conversation around him, around being a great rugby player, given the fact that his career is not extended that long just yet, but he's won 6 Nations titles, provincial titles. JK's got a lot to talk about here, but Mills, when you look at Antoine Dupont, what's he done by crossing over and winning a gold medal?
Oh, first, that was massive. What he'd done to be able to go from 15s and then go over and win, you know, a gold medal at the Olympics is huge. In terms of where he's at the moment, you know, he's right up there with one of the best players in the world. You know, his skill set, being able to kick off both feet, you know, from a ruck, you know, box kicks, his speed, his ability to be able, and also defensively. It's always a tough one, JK, when you're talking about the greatest of all time, because a lot of it, for me, in my opinion, comes back to the era you're actually playing it.
God, you annoy me, Goldie. Yeah. Like, everyone at home, Goldie knows that this conversation really annoys me incredibly.
What? Why?
Because
Why
the trouble is,
mate,
like this guy is amazing, right? I think he could end up being a great, but he's halfway through his career. He's a really influential rugby player. I love watching him. I think he's got the ability to change the game. But the trouble is with our game is we throw out all these words, and I reckon we need to sit back and make a decision on what is these words. What makes up a legend?
Can I ask you a first question? First question I'll ask you then. Does winning impact this conversation?
No, I think it's a combination. For example, if you get to the end of your career and you haven't won a World Cup, you know, I'll talk about basketball. You love basketball. Patrick Ewing? Great. Did he win the NBA?
No.
No. Right? So you've got to take 5 or 6 things. Yeah. You can't just say he's great. Well, right now he is world's best rugby player, but he's still got another 5 or 6 years to go. And at the end of it, like, for example, Stacey...
If he plays to the level he's playing at right now, but doesn't manage to find a way to win a Rugby World Cup,
so it will be irrelevant in the whole scheme of things. Right. So we talk about legends, we talk about all this stuff, and I actually want to put some rules about it. The great thing about the Hall of Fame in America for the NFL and the NBA is they've got a set of rules, and I reckon we need to have those set of rules.
See, I think as fans we look at it a little bit differently. I'll ask you a question then. If Dan Carter had, say, not won in 2015, we know he was a part of 2011, but he got injured, didn't play in the biggest games. If Dan Carter hadn't won a Rugby World Cup, and I regard Dan Carter to me as the greatest rugby player I've seen, because everything he could do, Mills, all of the things you talked about Antoine Dupont, that's what Dan Carter could do in the game, his impact on the game. But what I'm saying to you is, if he hadn't won a Rugby World Cup, because here, look, some of this footage...
That's an easy discussion, mate. There's a harder one. There's a harder one for you, but you go first, Mills. I'll shut up.
I think he was. I think I mean, and the story that he had, and you know, the fact that what he'd done on the rugby pitch while he was playing. If he hadn't won the World Cup, he'd be in that conversation and one of the greatest.
But he won the World Cup. Here's a harder one for you, Richie Mo'unga.
Yep.
There you go. Where's he going to sit?
Well, you always got to look at the impact they have at the international stage and how good and well he's played there and the impact he had. Look, as a Super Rugby player, I've said this, he's the most influential Super Rugby player. I'll ask you this question. So here's another thing, right? In the context of players around the globe, and you talk about the skill set that was required for the way they play, a team plays, for example, like for South Africa. You know, I'll throw a conversation around Andre Pollard. He's led them to 2 Rugby World Cups. His skill set and what he executes for the way that they play, I look at him and go, he starts being in that conversation.
Change the subject.
Johnny Wilkinson.
You change the subject.
No,
I'm
just saying to the fact, all of a sudden it's what you look at. Look, Christian Cullen was one of the greatest players ever.
I agree.
Game, right?
I agree. But for example, I want Richie Mo'unga to come back and try and win the World Cup with us so that he goes, at the end of his career, what's he going to say? So, like, when you talk about Dan Carter, you can't say, oh, if he hadn't won the World Cup, because he won it, and he come back from injury, so he is a great...
So it doesn't matter then, the winning thing doesn't matter in terms of their
ability? Like, he is, when he well, he probably hung up his boots now. He is a great because he went there. So it's these like.
Well, you saying criteria? What would be the absolute one criteria that you'd say has to be on the table to become or to even start looking at a great? Is it winning a Rugby World Cup? Is it being the best?
Well, if you're talking about the All Blacks, and I haven't thought too deeply about this, but maybe you start with 40 Test matches or something. Then you talk about super titles. Right? Then you talk about World Cups. So it has to be a series of things, right? So that you can go, oh, okay, as a young player, right? And don't get me wrong, I think Richie Mwanga is an amazing game changer, like awesome. I wouldn't like him to get to the end of his career and look back and think, I should have stayed, because actually all the rest of it doesn't matter, right? So I think what we need to do, and maybe the public can help us, what are these rules? So he's a great, he's a legend, right? He's getting there. Dupont, for me, will be a great. But I don't know what's going to happen. He might retire next year and go, because everyone's saying, why don't you take up gymnastics, son, so we can win some more golds? You know, they want him to go into motor racing because they think he can do everything.
Do you know this discussion achieved everything I wanted to achieve, was to get you going. And it worked, 100% it worked.